Andrew Jeune here with your Asian Racing Review, joined by Michael Cox, who's editor of the Asian Racing Report. Trackside at Happy Valley, bringing some colour to proceedings, certainly in more ways than one here, Michael. A lot to talk about this week. We've got international jockeys. We've got the scene in Sydney this weekend. We've got to talk about Hong Kong, some jockeys who are feeling the wrath of owners and racing managers alike. But we start off in Singapore, and some breaking news to a certain extent, and Michael Clements is going to be leaving the region a year ahead of when the season actually, or the racing in Singapore finally comes to a close.
Yep, good to join you, Andrew, from this beautiful backdrop here at Happy Valley. And yeah, sad news out of Singapore with Michael Clements, trainer of 25 years experience in Singapore. He came out of Zimbabwe, where he was a two-time champion in 1998. He's a champion trainer in 2020. Trained some top horses there in Singapore, including Count of Monte Cristo, and a really great representative for Singapore racing, who stood up and was president of the Trainers Association and spoke so passionately about the sport in Singapore. He was such a big believer of it there. So it's a real body blow to the sport in Singapore that Michael Clements has decided to leave as of the end of this month. Some of his horses already moving on. He's made it official, though, in a press release yesterday that he will be leaving, and perhaps considering his future. He's only a young trainer, really, 56. But, you know, what an awkward situation to be put in for Michael Clements now, and for everybody there in Singapore. The question now is, with someone of Michael Clements' standing, not a struggling trainer, the Singapore Turf Club have said racing will cease in October next year. Well, will it even make it that far? Is Clements the first domino to fall? Other trainers, are they eyeing the exit? Having spoken to a couple of them today, I would say the answer is yes.
Yeah, it's already been reported that Coin Toss, one of his better horses, is on the move and heading to Australia to be trained by Gay Waterhouse and Adrian Bott to potentially sort of increase his value as and when he goes to stud. I suppose the question is, with Michael goes, and you sort of alluded to it there, how many other dominoes have to fall before the whole thing comes crashing down, and they, you know, will they or won't they make it to next year and their proposed end date?
Well, I mean, there's some things they can do to ensure that they do make it until that end date, if they want racing to be an ongoing concern. But the first thing that the Singapore Turf Club and the officials and the government need to do in Singapore is communicate clearly to the participants. They need to support the participants. These trainers still don't know whether they're going to be receiving compensation. Their exit strategy is non-existent. They want to know about their staff and the toll this is all taking. So these people, these trainers in Singapore, they're just not being treated like human beings. They're not being treated with respect, and there's a flow-on effect when you've got private companies. These aren't licensed. It's not like Hong Kong where the club take care of everything. Michael Clements has moved to Singapore and made a life for himself there, and in doing that has taken in staff from the community and people that have worked for him throughout that entire tenure. He feels a responsibility for these staff that I don't think is shared by the Singapore Turf Club officialdom. And that is causing a massive effect on the mental health of the participants. There's no support for them. I just want to hear from them, to be honest. I think that the Singapore Turf Club officials want to hide away behind the scenes, you know, and they're scared of any sort of media scrutiny, and rightly so, because there's been no plan and that I can see. So I'd like to hear from some officials within the Singapore Turf Club, but I'm sure that the participants would more like to hear some concrete plans for what's the exit strategy here. Tell us why we should stay until October next year. Very disappointing situation, and very sad as far as Michael Clements is concerned. What I would say is Michael Clements has handled himself with incredible poise and professionalism, transparency. It's easy to get hold of, and he hasn't fired shots emotionally at the club there when he could have. I would say that he's got a lot of respect. He's a person with a lot of respect for Singapore community, society, the government, and the way things work there. In fact, a year ago when we did a story with Michael Clements, when we were participants were desperate for answers about the future in Singapore, Michael Clements, I remember a line distinctly. He said to me, I have confidence that racing in Singapore will turn around and succeed because the government here generally gets things right in the end. Well, they haven't got this right so far. There's still a chance, but Michael Clements won't be part of it, and Singapore's worse for that.
Any indication what he does next?
No, he's going to take a month or two off to think about it. Look, Michael Clements is an interesting guy. He's got more options than just horse training. He's a qualified life coach. He's into some meditation, a very healthy, broad-thinking guy. Like, I'm sure whatever Michael Clements does, he'll be a success, but horse racing will be the poorer for it if he's not a horse trainer.
All right, we'll keep watching and updating then on Singapore. Moving to Japan, and Joao Moreira on the weekend had a great day at Nakayama. We had the St. Ledger trial there, and I assumed, it was a two-horse race as far as the market was concerned. Sol Arians, so I assume everyone expected him when it was 1.6 favourite. Him and Moreira's mount were the only two in single figures, but it was Joe in rare form who came out on top.
Yeah, have a look at this ride from gate 4. Look, Takashi Yokoyama did have the disadvantage on Sol Arians, the 1.6 favourite. He was drawn out in gate 14, but Moreira, just classic Moreira ride. If you said, like, draw me up the typical Joao Moreira ride, this is it. Free back the fence, just let him go to sleep. But you watch when he comes off the turn at Nakayama, it's a very short straight, and it's not straightforward straight either. And you've got to have that momentum coming off the turn. So even though he's back on the rail, it was why they called him Phantasma back in Sao Paulo, the ghost. He just appears out of the pack with momentum and just sweeps past them for the big win. Yeah, he had an easier task from the inside gate than that of Yokoyama on the favourite, who rounded the last turn 8 wide. That's not an exaggeration. Give him a pretty good task. Sol Arians, I wouldn't be dropping off the horse. Sol Arians, the Guineas winner, but he's suffered a couple of defeats now, firstly in the Derby and now here. Wasn't through lack of effort. Okay, next up, this was the St. Ledger trial. Next up, the St. Ledger for both of them, you would assume. But points on the board there for Joao Moreira and Lebenstill.
And Joe will be in Sydney this weekend for the Golden Rose at Rose Hill, teaming up with Militarise again for Chris Waller. And Sydney, or Australia in general, are doing a good job of attracting these international jockeys. Ryan Moore will be in town as well to ride the Golden Slipper winner in Shinzo. Yeah,
one of the great features of the revamped Sydney Spring is that seeing these jockeys come down, these international jockeys attracted. Maybe they've fallen a little bit short in attracting international horses to the event, but it's great to see, like, Ryan Moore v Joao Moreira in Sydney is just at Rose Hill is a fantastic sight. Just even a few weeks ago when the news broke, I thought there was sort of a breakthrough for Sydney when Ryan Moore was announced that he would answer the SOS when James McDonald was out and Chris Waller had called him in to ride Shinzo. That was on the back page of the News Limited newspaper, the Daily Telegraph, right there next to the rugby league reporting. And I don't know, as a former, still a reporter that's based in Australia mostly, and I just thought it really struck me that the profile of the sport of racing, we can be quite down on the future of horse racing, but the fact that the story didn't have to explain who Ryan Moore was. The story was Ryan Moore's coming and Joao Moreira's coming. And people love these jockeys. They attract attention and they attract betting turnover. So Moreira comes in great form. He rode 3 winners on that day. And, yeah, just looks in fine form, looked really motivated. He returns to Japan after he rides in Australia for a couple of weeks. Then it's back to Brazil and Argentina for a couple of Group 1 assignments down there. Then back to Japan on October 20 for a run that goes right through to December 10 and the Hong Kong international races, where you'd expect he'd have some rides there for the Japanese Raiders. 5 straight weeks of Group 1s in Japan during that period. He is licensed, including the St. Ledger, and going right through to the Japan Cup on November 26. So big end of season, end of year plans for Joao Moreira.
All right, so again, keep watching. We'll have it all covered here. We'll stay in Australia. And news, as I mentioned at the start, of a jockey falling foul of a racing manager and an owner to a certain extent, and it's been discussed at great length in many other places as well. But Craig Williams, Giga Kick, and what's going on there?
Yeah, just the Racing Victoria stewards fining Rod Douglas, the racing manager for Jonathan Munn's, managing owner of Giga Kick, $1,500 for comments he made about Craig Williams' ride on Giga Kick when he was defeated. Now, it has been talked about at length, as you said, but I just wanted to sort of mention Craig Williams' response to the controversy and just how much class he showed in the aftermath of ultimately losing the ride at this stage when Rod Douglas said that felt like he wanted to strangle Williams and used the word strangle repeatedly in this radio interview. There was some deliberation of whether he'd kept the ride. Well, he has lost the ride to James McDonald. If you just go back and have a look at the Craig Williams interview, the first public interview he gave, which is after he won the first race at Flemington last Saturday, and you want an example of how to represent horse racing, if Rod Douglas would like to go back and watch that interview, there you will see all the qualities that he didn't show in that diatribe that he launched at Craig Williams. Poise, class, dignity, perspective. And that's maybe the biggest one. Craig Williams came out and said, look, I've lost rides before, I've got rides before. Be constructive, represent horse racing, yeah. Be grateful for the success that you have had. Jockeys make mistakes. It's okay to criticise them, but belittling and this the language used, really disappointing. But Craig Williams, there's an example of somebody who has racing's best interest at heart and gets on with it, as we saw later on in the day when he rode the Group 1 win on Mr. Brightside.
Who's absolutely flying as well, Mr. Brightside. We're still in Australia, actually, but with a Hong Kong angle now, as Romantic Warrior arrived on Sunday. There's vision available. He's out on the track just doing a light canter so far. Any news on the trip over and how he's settling it?
Yeah, he arrived on Sunday, and of course, Danny Jeune needing to switch Romantic Warrior's feed to one that was acceptable to the Australian authorities and quarantine facility there. Romantic Warrior really not taking to it straight away. So maybe it had some Vegemite in it or something. He didn't really like the taste of it. Danny just openly, Danny usually can't get anything out of him. It was funny that this line that Danny's saying, the horse really isn't eating, we have to change his feed. Usually Danny's pretty big on the one-word answers to me when I chase him around at track work at Sha Tin. I think there's a mutual respect, but he doesn't talk much. But Michael Clements had the microphone in the interview. I don't know if he thought he was in an interview or not, Danny, but he was quite open about the fact that his horse is struggling to eat. So that's the story we're going with now. It makes me think, how many times do we not know? Yeah, this is the thing. How many times do we not know? It's just up to the trainer whether they say the horse is struggling to adapt. But this horse is struggling to acclimatise before it even got there. But at least he's trying to get him on the feed before he gets there. So he arrived on Sunday. I've been in contact with the assistant trainer Ben So, former jockey here in Hong Kong, who's now assistant to Danny Jeune. And he's saying, look, the horse is tracking in the right direction as far as the feed is concerned. Got out there and stretched his legs today. And look, no word yet on when the horse is going to gallop, but he's still got just under 3 weeks before his first up assignment in the Turnbull Stakes, which will be the lead-up run for his ultimate target, early spring target in Australia, the Cox Plate. So close watch on our Romantic Warrior. Let's see if Danny's is open about the updates next time I see him. But look, there's always a risk with a horse coming from overseas, whether it'll perform at its optimum. If Romantic Warrior can, it'll be an exciting thing for Hong Kong, and it'll be a big chance in whatever he runs in. But yes, let's just keep tabs there and keep a close watch on Asian Racing Report, and maybe we can give you some insight.
Yeah, I think generally speaking, regardless of what your interest might be, for the general narrative, you want Romantic Warrior to perform, because then it only encourages more international participation. So hope that he does settle in and can produce his best, certainly the turnbull and then the Cox Plate after that. While we're talking about Hong Kong as well, Michael, you're there obviously a couple of weeks into the season. We spoke about the jockey's title race, or if there would be a title race as such, on the Hong Kong preview podcast. But Hugh Bowman has come out all guns blazing.
Yeah, 3 wins on Sunday at Sha Tin. We're recording this just before the Wednesday night meeting that'll be just here at Happy Valley. So we might come out and knock a couple home. We don't know what's going to happen at that meeting, of course. But just going off last Sunday's meeting, Hugh Bowman riding absolutely beautifully at the moment. Just really things are happening for me. And in our newsletter, which you can subscribe to on the website, you can find there Michael Cox on Monday, my weekly column. I wrote about, maybe my thinking has changed a bit since we did that podcast, where I've said, look, it's Hugh Bowman locked into second, but I just can't see a truthful challenge. But you know what? If Zac thinks he can take a break, some meetings off, I think I've seen enough. It's only 3 meetings into 88. I get it. But there's a few points that I've made on Monday that I think really work in Hugh Bowman's favour, and that is that Zac rides for John Size. John Size takes a little while to get going into the season. Hugh's 6 winners for 6 different trainers. He's very popular. This is the first time he's ever started a season in Hong Kong as well. It's very rare that you find someone who's had 90 wins, 5 Group 1s, 2 derbies, turns up to Hong Kong to the start of the season already popular, already knowing the lay of the land. And he just rides Hong Kong so well. I just think it's such a trademark of top jockeys that when you get to Moreira, Moore, Purton, they just have their own way of riding. Yeah, they adapt to the situation, sure, but they have. I just think Hugh's patience and the way he can weave through a field. He can also lead on a horse, but he sort of has a way of bending things to his will. And I just saw it, having been there in person on Sunday. It's the way he's riding, how competitive he is. If Zac loses 20 wins on that big total he racked up last season, Hugh Bowman will be the one to scoop on them and might be just pushing him deep into the season.
All right, as you say, a long way to go, a lot of water to go under the bridge. As yet, that probably just about do us, I think, Michael, for this time around. You mentioned Michael Cox on Monday. What else are we looking at on the site this week? I know you did want to mention, just very quickly, this happened a couple of weeks ago now, the tragic passing of Filip Minarik. You'll be paying tribute to him as well this week.
Yeah, go to the site and you'll see like a tribute to Filip, who was a good friend of mine and close friend of jockey manager Adam Harrigan in Japan, who represented Filip in Japan. A lot of our Japanese fans who might watch this our videos and follow our site he was an immensely popular character, Filip Minarik, and I just wanted to just pay tribute to him. And there's a story on the site, but most of all, what a positive, likable, charismatic, kind person. Filip rode in a lot of different places around the world, but he made friends fast wherever he went. Just had that way about him. And, I just think that's the Filip Minarik that I'd like to remember. He showed enormous courage in coming back from a terrible fall a couple of years ago. He'd be sorely missed by many people all around the world, and particularly Japanese racing fans who really supported him through that injury and his rehabilitation. So go to the site and check that out. Lots of other great stuff on there from our chief racing writer, David Morgan. I'll be doing whatever I can from here on Wednesday night, and looking forward to next week.
All right, great stuff. We'll speak soon, and enjoy your night there at Happy Valley.
Thank you.
All right, well, like and subscribe. Keep following us, of course, on all the major social channels, and tune again for more from Asian Racing Review.